Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org. More Idaho Matters now from the studios of Boise State Public Radio News. I'm Gemma Gaudette. Last week, the City of Nampa announced it was thinking of handing over the Ford Idaho Center to the College of Western Idaho. Now, the center has an indoor arena, an outdoor amphitheater, and a horse park and sports center, and it is served as the venue for everything from concerts to the Snake River Stampede. So we wanted to know why the City of Nampa wants to give up the center and why CWI might want to acquire it. So we asked Nampa Mayor Debbie Kling and CWI President Gordon Jones to join us today to talk more about it. Welcome back, both of you, to Idaho Matters.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Gemma.
So, Mayor, let me begin with you. Where did this idea come from?
You know, the Ford Idaho Center and the entire property is such an incredibly amazing property. And as you said it so well, it serves in so many ways the entire community. But with our limited budgets that have continued to get tighter, we've really pondered how do we achieve the highest and best utilization when our funding priorities go to where our citizens have said, right? Police, public safety, and infrastructure. And, that's where our focus is as a city. And you know what? As I thought about it, I felt like we are holding back this property and the city cannot utilize it. I mean, we are utilizing it, but we can't fully fund it long term for the renewal and replacement as it's an aging facility at 30 years old. It's still wonderful, but we've got to invest in it, put more money into it, and our budget's just tight. So I thought, you know what? It's sitting right there contiguous to CWI, and there is so much opportunity ahead. So it's really considering maybe a different model and continuing to do what it's doing, serving the community just the same, but adding in another element, and that is what CWI can bring to the table.
And Mayor, if you were to do this, you mentioned infrastructure, you mentioned public safety. What would that allow the city to be able to do if they no longer had the Ford Idaho Center?
Well, CWI did do an assessment of the facility to see what kind of deferred maintenance there is. And there's quite a bit of deferred maintenance. And I think, so I'll let President Jones speak to this and their ability to meet those needs. But it frees up those dollars that if we have deferred maintenance on existing city buildings. We are in need of a police substation on the north side. There's a lot of need for the dollars that we have, and it allows those funds to go to the needs we have as a city, especially like the police substation that we're needing north, or it's actually a precinct, adding in the future needs of the city, but able to meet those instead of those funds being diverted over to an entertainment venue. It's meeting the actual needs of our city.
So, President Jones, let me bring you into the conversation. What does CWI then get out of this deal? I mean, what would the college end up doing with the center? But let's start with what you see as the potential for this.
Sure. Well, to me, this is a story and an opportunity. This is really about opportunity and growth for both Nampa, the region, and obviously the college. We are Idaho's largest community college. We're 31,000 students, and we're still young. And so we're in the process of establishing a campus right there in Nampa. So the ability to plan and unlock the potential of this, both the Ford Idaho Center property, which for those listeners may not know, it's literally separated by some railroad tracks, but it's adjoining the Nampa campus. And so what it does is it really unlocks that full potential from a planning standpoint. So I think of several things when I think of this. One is, to me, it's a way to continue to expand educational programs and learning venues. We are certainly thinking about where are new programs. We have an ag and horticulture commitment and program right there in Nampa, that now these equine facilities, the Snake River Stampede, these events, all can be a part of growing educational opportunities and the learning venues. To me, it's also hands-on learning. At CWI, we do a lot of hands-on learning that leads to earning. And so these kind of venues also offer that place to really learn by doing. And then to me, one of the things that's nice about being a public, the City of Nampa conveying this to CWI, is that we're preserving community events. We can preserve the beloved Snake River Stampede, the horse shows, the tournaments, the high school tournaments and graduations. And then from my standpoint, those represent the most obvious opportunities. It's really about a school that's growing. We're on our way to more growth, not less. And this unlocks that potential.
So, Mayor, this idea would need the approval of the Nampa City Council, and it would be what's called a conveyance. Can you explain what that means?
A conveyance is, it's really where you convey the property, the land, the assets in this situation, the buildings, everything on that property, and at no cost. This building is owned by the taxpayers. It's been funded by the taxpayers, and it is going to a public entity being conveyed over, transferred over to another public entity, which is CWI, to be governed by a local board, just as it is currently. The oversight is your local city council. Well, just conveying it over means the responsibility of the property, right? But there is no financial transaction here. And I believe that's the way it should be, because and some in Nampa would say you're giving something away that the Nampa taxpayers have funded for a number of years. But as we look to the future and the continuing ongoing upkeep and the future of the building, this building is utilized by the entire Treasure Valley. It's a benefit to everyone. And to continue to maximize that benefit, that's why we are talking about and considering the conveyance, which is transferring it over, not selling it to CWI, but really we're handing it over to the College of Western Idaho to continue to steward for our citizens.
Mayor, what have you heard so far since this announcement was made about this idea last week?
You know, some love it and some hate it. So it's, just the reality is there's always two differing opinions. But what I have found is that when people really listen and they ask questions, and like Jimmy, you're asking great questions. When people ask questions and they better understand the why behind it and the future, the vision within it, a lot of people kind of change their idea. If they're against it, they're more favorable toward it. And then some are like, do not sell this property because it would no longer be under the oversight of a local board. And so this is a weird analogy, but when you I've heard the stories of people that put their baby up for adoption because they cannot care for that child, but they wanted to give their child that they dearly loved a great life. And then you see that great life that child had. I feel that like this is our baby, and it's very special, and it's an endearing property that the citizens that have been here for a long time really care about. We are handing this over to CWI to continue to steward. And the average citizen won't see a significant change in the events and the stampede and the horse park, as President Jones shared. But you know what? We need to be able to invest in it as we move to the future. And with the reduced budgets coming into the city in the last few years after certain legislation was passed, it's made it very, very difficult for the city. And it's important that we take care of this incredibly wonderful asset that we have sitting right here in the middle of the Treasure Valley.
President Jones, the mayor mentioned deferred maintenance on this, and she said, it's an aging building. It's 30 years old. That very, very much makes me feel very old because I remember when it was quite new. But that's right. But it's surprising that it's 30 years old. And I think sometimes time gets away from us. So talk to us about what that deferred maintenance would look like, because does that mean you would need to raise taxes or tuition at CWI, or is this a potential moneymaker for the college?
Well, first of all, I'd say no. I mean, our view is that this is not going to affect our students' tuition and fees and the property taxpayers. What what many people may not realize is that as CWI, we have more levers than your municipalities might. We have a foundation, we have donors, there's the corporate community, that we have people and staff that often cities don't have, that can allow us to invite those parties in. And then the other piece of this, and I don't want to, hopefully, this is an audience that appreciates this. A lot of municipalities are really focused on year to year budgets and moving. And as a college, we certainly do that. But we have a locally elected board that also likes to think multi year. And so we can solve some of these topics in a multi year with greater levers than maybe your typical city can. And so when it comes to deferred maintenance, when it comes to visioning that, we can both partner, think about different sources of income that can preserve the vitality of these venues. And so, from my standpoint, we're bullish on it. We recognize that certainly pipes or heaters at times need to be replaced, and we're doing all of that. We've had that due diligence done. But from our standpoint, we think that that venue, with the partnerships, with the kind of levers we can use, we're going to have a path that allows us to do that without putting that burden on students, which I'm adamant about, or our tax-paying community.
And President Jones, I would think this isn't that surprising of an idea. There are a lot of colleges that have music and events venues on their campuses.
That's true. I mean, there's a reason that, well, let's start with Idaho. 6 out of the 8 public colleges and universities already have venues that do these entertainment, as you said, music, concerts, athletics, not least of which is our friends and sister institution, Boise State, down the street. So in some ways, we're the exception, not the rule. But there's a reason why in these metro areas of this size, you typically will have colleges or universities doing this, because we can integrate and activate by day, year round. If this was somehow either privately owned or even dare I say with the city, we're able to kind of more robustly activate it, use it for learning spaces, et cetera. So you're right. This is not exceptional. This is in some ways typical.
So I asked the mayor what she has heard from folks and their response since this announcement was made last week. I'm curious about what you have heard as well.
I think many people that we talk to are excited about CWI. I think people recognize that for a school we've only been offering classes for 16 years, and we served over 31,000 individuals. We're on our 10th consecutive semester of growth. I think people feel like, wow, this is about opportunity. This is a school that's on the move. We've got faculty and students that are dedicated to helping students learn and earn. And these are Idaho residents. 98% of our students come from Idaho. So I've really heard very favorable things. I've heard people encouraging us, a lot of what could be, whether that be in the community, learning, K-12, transportation solutions. I'm getting a lot of calls, and the vast majority of them have to do with this is a positive. Wow, we're excited. On the other hand, we recognize this is a proposal, and the City of Nampa is committed to undertaking that. And so if it were to pass, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm from the community side.
So as I mentioned, this has to be approved by the City Council in Nampa. It would also need the approval of the CWI Board of Trustees. So Mayor, if everything goes through, when would this handoff potentially happen?
Well, if it moves through smoothly, and we have a lot more meetings and town halls to go through, but we do have our public hearing on August 11th. If we were to meet the timeline that we would anticipate, we would hope it to be done by the end of our fiscal year, which is September 30th.
Well, I want to thank you both so very much for taking time out of both of your very busy schedules to talk to us about this. We've been speaking with Nampa Mayor Debbie Kling and College of Western Idaho President Gordon Jones. We've been discussing the city possibly handing over the Ford Idaho Center to the College of Western Idaho. Now, you can find out more at a town hall, which will be at the Ford Idaho Center on July 15th. And then, as the mayor mentioned, a public hearing in Nampa on August 11th. And that'll do it for this episode of Idaho Matters. Thanks so much for listening. And just a reminder, you can find all of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts.
These days, there's so much news, it can be hard to keep up with what it all means for you, your family, and your community. The Consider This podcast from NPR features our award-winning journalism. 6 days a week, we bring you a deep dive on a news story and provide the context and analysis that helps you make sense of the news. We get behind the headlines. We get to the truth. Listen to the Consider This podcast from NPR.